Hello! Today I'll be exploring how much of an impact the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963 had on the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Here are just a few key facts regarding the march. This march took place on the 28th of August in 1963, just in front of the Lincoln Memorial. With over 250,000 peaceful protesters, this was the largest march for civil rights ever. This 3 hour long event took around 3 months to organize, and today we'll be exploring its contribution and the extent of its contribution to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. First, a bit of background context. The 1950s was a time of consensus due to two primary aspects. The first of which being the commencement of the Cold War in 1947, just 3 years prior, which meant that people were often extremely hesitant to criticize the USA, otherwise they would often be deemed communist. The second one was the increasing affluence of the ordinary working class, which meant that people were often less critical. In fact, between 1946 and 1960, Americans experienced a period of economic expansion unrivaled to any other time, and that also saw living conditions and gross national product more than double. Here's a quote by Eric Foner to support this. By 1960, an estimated 60% of Americans enjoyed what the government defined as a middle-class standard of living. Now, we'll go on a journey through the events directly related to the March on Washington on 1963. So first, in 1941, A. Philip Randolph called a march to draw to attention the exclusion of African Americans from jobs in the national defense industry. Following this, however, Executive Order 8802 was ordered by Franklin D. Roosevelt, which meant that A. Philip Randolph cancelled the march. In 1957, around 16 years after this, which was also the third year of the Brown v. Board case, civil rights demonstrators congregated from around the USA in front of the Lincoln Memorial to protest something known as the Prayer Pilgrimage for Freedom. A year after this, in October, a youth march for integrated schools was held, which basically protested against the little progress made following the Brown v. Board case. Next, in 1963, organizations such as the NALC, SCLC, CORE, and SNCC noted that across the USA, there was still prevalent black unemployment, minimal wages, pure job mobility, systematic disenfranchisement, and racial segregation across many aspects, which meant that the protests from a previous protest had not been realized. In the same year, 1963, A. Philip Randolph, along with Bayard Rustin, organized the upcoming March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. We'll talk about this a bit later. So on the 28th of August in 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom is held, which is 3 hours long, as I mentioned in the very beginning, and primarily advocated for the civil and economic rights of African Americans. A year later, following JFK's assassination, on the 2nd of July, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed in Congress, which outlawed discrimination based on race, color, sex, national origin, sexual orientation, and gender identity. This was during the Eisenhower presidency. A year following this, on August 6th, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, which prohibited racial discrimination for voting, primarily for southern states which used to have measures such as literacy tests and poll taxes. Before the march. So there were primarily 7 aspects which led up to the march. These included segregation, voter suppression, discriminatory unemployment, and just in general legal impediments which stopped black equality. The planning process for this march was conducted by Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph and was organized just within 3 months and included things such as telegraphing prominent civil rights leaders, etc. Think about the venue, booking that. And things even including most trivial things such as finding alternative traffic routes due to the volume of people that would participate on that day. So, a bit after that, a few prominent civil rights leaders, as well as Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph, met with JFK for his approval. In the beginning, he was a bit hesitant, since he thought that it would escalate to violence. And this is a quote which he said is, "We want success in the Congress, not just a big show at the Capitol." In fact, from before, this is just a collage from the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the left side including images, first top left being Martin Luther King during his "I Have a Dream" speech. You can see the rest. On the right was the official memorandum and the pre-plan organized by Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph. Now, I thought it would be significant to show the ethnic orientations which were present in the march, with African Americans representing 76% and whites representing 24%, which is actually quite a significant number, which showed how many whites supported this cause, which was instrumental later on in the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So this was a list of demands which Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph made, which they presented to Congress and everyone who attended the march. This I found in the National Archives of the USA. So as you can see, number 3, this included things such as integrated schools, building on the Brown v. Board case, and number 8, which was an increase in the minimum wage. So finally, I think that the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963 had a paramount role in the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, since without it, John F. Kennedy probably would not have supported and passed on this bill, which, following his assassination, was passed in the Eisenhower presidency. Here is just a quote which I have taken, which, as you can see, supports this, since the Newsday's Bruin says that it might not have changed the minds of Southern Democrats or allied Republicans, but it did help build popular support, especially among whites. This was supported in the infographic I showed, relating that 24% or 60,000 of the population who went to this march were white. Also, Michael Wenger, a historian at the Huffington Post, said that the march was a key factor in the enactment of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Also passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which I mentioned, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. However, an argument can also be made that the death of Kennedy also was instrumental in this, and passed things such as the 1965 Revenue Act. Thank you.